Good afternoon. I'm standing here with the MMC for Finance and the chair for Gauteng. Thank you. How are you doing?
No, thank you for having us. We are doing extremely well under the circumstances. But of course, we are tired, but not extremely tired because we are just from a state of the city address, but also from a political aspect, gearing ourselves up for the next and the final leg, particularly of the election period, which is like 29 days away from election day.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, in terms of the city of Ekurhuleni, can you confidently say that the city will go forward being financially more stable and trying to recover in relation to all the controversy and issues around it?
Well, definitely, and the confidence is particularly sparked by the fact that the economic freedom fighters are still in participation in terms of the composition of the executive committee, and we are able to address many issues in relation to particularly operation and ultimately the fiscus of the city. We are confident in that the plans that were put in place were able to implement them, such as the more aggressive approach in terms of the operations which is a credit control program of action that is particularly directed at the 1,000 entities that owe the city of Ekurhuleni in abundance of 12 billion that are recoverable costs, by the way, but also look the plans of looking at other revenue streams and enhancement schemes that can actually look at the potential revenue enhancement of the city, such as tapping into other grants that might be eligible for the city of Ekurhuleni, and the potential increase of the current grants that we have. We currently have an equitable share grant that is given to us by National Treasury, which is roughly about 5.5 billion, and we feel as the city, once we have submitted the necessary business plans to National Treasury, it should go up to at least 7.5 billion, which would increase our own fiscus by at least 2 billion, that we are able to then do greater service delivery, particularly of highly congested areas such as Tembisa, Katlehong and Gauteng.
Thank you. And speaking about the program, could I ask you how is that engaging in terms of holding these entities, mainly companies, accountable, and in relation to countering the narrative that everybody speaks about it's communities or people stealing electricity when in fact it's actually companies?
Definitely. I mean, the debt patterns are at 60-40, 60% companies owe us when we look at the historic debt that is owed to the city, with only about 40% that is owed by households. Why? Is because companies that are the biggest consumers in terms of both water and electricity. You would note that the city of Ekurhuleni has been for the longest of times regarded as the workshop of the country, meaning that there's a relatively high level of manufacturing hubs and industrial activity within the city of Ekurhuleni. As to whether it equates to the increase in terms of economic activity of our people, it does not, because we still rank the highest, even above provincial and national projections in terms of the unemployment rate is the city of Ekurhuleni. So we are looking at that aspect of ensuring that obviously there's an increase of companies actually making sure that they do their payments. And the weirdest thing that we have had to find, particularly with Operation Siyacima Manje Namhlanje, is that there's not a single company that we went to where I physically myself went to with the department, and having gone there, not only do they owe the rates and taxes that warrants us to actually turn off the services that is due, is that they all have illegally connected water and electricity. And what we then do after that particular process is that we issue a fine, but equally as well then issue a notice to the department where we are now going to track as to what is now their spending pattern, so that we can really back bill them for all the times that we would have deemed that they would have illegally connected both water and electricity.
Thank you, MSC. And then in your position as chair, what is your speculation or prediction in relation to the achievement or the victory of EFF in terms of winning the elections in Gauteng?
Well, look, we go into any marathon with the projection that we are going to take pole position. So that's what we are working towards. We are working towards total victory, anything above 50%. Our ground forces and volunteers have been out on the ground continuously engaging members of society, not only in the city of Ekurhuleni, but the entire Gauteng, you know. There's no organization that has been as visible, interactive, having held programs throughout the entire province, like the Economic Freedom Fighters has throughout, you know, consistently as well. Because heading towards the election day, you are now going to see a lot of them now coming up. But we've been there, you know, consistently since last year, November, with the introduction of what we would have termed youth bashes that actually pushes the young people to go out and vote. And what did we see? We saw an increase of young people actually coming out to vote, and equally of new people actually forming part of the voters' roll in South Africa as a result of the activities that the EFF has held. So we've also been well received in all of the communities that we've been to. We have been the reception has been just as great. You know, we've went to not only colored communities and Indian communities, but also what people would have termed our strong bases. Like just yesterday, we're in Winnie Mandela, we're in Davidton, we're in Alex on Saturday. We have touched all corners of society in the city, in Gauteng, and we have been well received. So we are anticipating total victory. Where we don't get total victory, because at the end of the day, it's the voters who deem it fit and see it fit as to whether they have the much neededness or the necessary numbers that are needed for us to go into government on our own, is that we can only come up as second position, because third position is not an option. We are the third largest now, and our projection of growth should be taking us to either number one or falling back at least as number two.
Thank you, MFC. And one last question, I'm sorry. In terms of the mayor projected all these programs in terms of employment and stuff, what is your opinion, especially in relation to the EFF and the youth, of this planned projection in terms of creating jobs?
Well, definitely, it would have been a plan that we have had to interact with at some stage with him. The only proposition that we still continuously worried about is the proposition of National Treasury, of saying that we must look at not employing as many people because we are spending too much money in terms of our human resource capital, in terms of financing, you know, and our payroll. And the prospect of trying to create an environment that would allow for the absorption of jobs currently is on the perspective of EPWP, which is nothing but just a glorified approach of trying to do something when you are really not doing something, you know. So we should try and by all means look at doing away with that, even if it means that the National Treasury guidelines must actually be taken down so as to allow for us to employ more people. Because what do we need? We need to insource. We need to insource a lot of the services that the city renders, because those are continuous services and not just things that are temporal, such as the waste collection. Why aren't we in abundance having insourced all of our waste pickers? Because we do that on a daily basis, and it's one of our core responsibilities as the city.